Welcome in, welcome all folks, you're here for a never before seen attraction. It's Kahuna, Bahuna, Build, Bonanza. Hold on to those helmets, and if you're watching at home, try not to fall off your chair. With this fantastical, phantasmal, jaw-dropping, eye-opening, mind-bending sight, you're about to behold. Prepare yourself, guardians and ghosts, for this. Wow! Amazing! Yes, that's right, people. A round of applause. Your eyes do not deceive you. What a sight to behold! I think this Titan's earned 1 grand prize for such a feat. Damage from a distance? Who would have thought? Now, sir, if you wouldn't mind a quick word, could you let the Guardians out there know how you made that happen? Oh god, he's hitting the green one. Run, everyone run!
Yeah, okay, that's pretty long enough of an intro. Let's get into it. Here's the very quick build. Got there a bit longer, and it's gone. At this point, you hopefully can tell this build's about Flechette Storm, but it's equal parts about some of the most ridiculous amounts of grapple spam I've had the pleasure of using. And that's all happening thanks to the stars of the show, HOIL, Flechette Storm, Into the Fray, Grapple, Frenzy Blade, a barricade of your choice, Buried Bloodline, and the small but mighty fragments, Thread of Generation, Warding, Fury, and Ascent. I'm going to kick off going over HOIL because understanding why we've got this, what it can do in the kit, and what makes it so amazing here is the real jelly at the center of the build. In most TLDR is use one ability to give the other two regen, and using your melee or grenade when the buff's up, damage boost them. Where the real spice comes from is how HOIL pushes Grapple's dual ability typing, in that Grapple functions uniquely like a grenade and a melee. Using this part is like using a grenade, and this part is like a powered melee but also a grenade, kinda. Why we care is that grappling according to Inmost is using our grenade, with the grapple melee being considered a powered melee, which means Inmost perk is going to trigger on both sides of this ability being used, making grapple pseudo self-refunding. As in you grapple, then grapple melee kicks off grenade regen back to the grapple as it's counted as a melee. Grappling to a tangle also counts as using your grenade, so that'll empower your melee and class regen for every tangle you grapple. And on top of all of that, melees uniquely interact with HOIL, in that landing a hit can give multiple stacks. Each flechette needle gives 1 stack, every enemy hit by grapple melee gives 1 stack, and anything caught in the swing of Frenzied also gives 1 stack. TLDR, loads of ability regen. This is also fully ignoring things like Thread of Fury, which can give massive chunks of melee energy with tangles, Thread of Generation, which is just bonus grenade energy for dealing damage, Into the Fray's passive melee regen with Woven Mail, which when tagged alongside HOIL's regen, makes those melee charges come back stupidly quick, and Buried Bloodline's passive grenade regen off of Devour. But aside from the amount of spam we've been able to tap into since Edge of Fate, this exotic now also has a surprising amount of damage stacking it's capable of doing, especially for an exotic whose focus was never really damage in the first place. In most damage perks for melee and grenade are part together when you're using grapple melee, splits into 2 individual damage numbers, and any stats that go past 100 for melee and grenade apply that multiplicative scalar of up to 30% and 65% increased damage respectively. So even with my stats being kinda bad, and having to rely on Blast Distributor to give me an extra 65 grenade stats, we go from hitting at sub 100 stats in melee and grenade, 778, to then 110 melee and 170 grenade with Blast Distributor to 2162, which is a 178% increased damage boost. Again, this is also missing 90 stat in the melee and 35 in grenade, so this isn't even the damage ceiling you can potentially hit. But to put that into perspective, its damage starts to be not far off what a Synthos Grapple can do. Difference being that in the time it takes a Synthos build to recharge a Grapple grenade, you've probably pumped out 5 or 6 Grapples and many Flechette Storms. The strength of this build isn't really its ability to do crazy burst, but it's so good at just giving you endless abilities to fight with. It's genuinely one of the few builds where it feels like I can come out of a fight and have more abilities than I would have started off with. And what is by far the most important part of the video, gameplay tips. First, this build is not easy to nail. I almost dropped making this video entirely because at first I thought this build was bad. It's not, it's an awesome build and it's really good, but it's absolutely one where there's a high skill ceiling to using it. But if you get it down, you too can fly around on your Titan full of joy and whimsy. But there's one golden rule that you have got to follow. Always prioritize survivability. In this build that comes in 2 main forms, woven mail through breaking tangles, which we get from Into the Fray, and healing through buried bloodlines devour. One of the mistakes I made when I first put this together and started tackling harder content was that I was more focused on ability regen over survivability. Big mistake. It should 99.9% of the time be the other way around. Ability regen comes naturally, your survivability you've got to work for. Because of that, you need to be really aware of when you can make tangles, and when you can make them, where they spawn in. With Flechette Storm, you'll sometimes be making tangles at a distance, meaning occasionally you have to make an effort to get to that tangle, to then break that tangle, to then get woven mail. But we've got the best grenade in the game for covering distance, so if grappling to that tangle will not get you killed, do it every time. Once you're there though, do not start re-grappling off of it, break it straight away. The only time I don't break a tangle is if I already have a high timer on woven mail, or there's nothing scary fighting me. I hope the footage shows good examples of me both trying to spawn tangles in convenient places and then breaking them almost immediately. If you see me not do that, that is me making a mistake. The second thing you need to manage is buried bloodlines devour. It'll take 4 kills on red bars or 1 kill on a yellow bar to get it, and it needs to be a priority to do so. The aggressive playstyle that you're seeing in the background is entirely enabled by that combo of devour, woven mail. You have a lot of time between getting kills with buried bloodline, if not an unlimited amount of time, but you need to have devour as much as possible. You can set yellow bars and above up really nicely with Flechette Storm, so they're down to that 1-2 shot range with buried to get devour. So assuming you're doing what I've just said well, now I can start to talk about your ridiculously aggressive playstyle. Your grapple is the ability in this build that comes back in, I kid you not, a few seconds at times, so you should aim this at enemies 24/7 and be using it essentially off cooldown because it fuels everything. I hate nothing more when I Flechette Storm and realise that I'm doing it on top of a fully charged grapple because I know I've just missed out on free damage and ability regen. Your go-to combo in this build is grapple, and as soon as your feet touch the ground, do a little slide and then Flechette Storm and grapple. It's that quick at times at recharging, and it's a really lethal combo, meaning as long as there's a kill lined up at the end of it, that'll trigger Devour, and that's going to keep you in fights. You can be down to the teeniest little slither of health, but if you know that there is a kill that you can get, this build will not lose steam. And everything with this build loops back into itself. You grapple in, melee, that's regen back to your nade and class, tangle spawns in, throw it down, thread of fury procs, woven mail and melee regen from Into the Fray. Then Flechette Storm, generation and devour will give grenade energy, grapple again, HOIL's just going to be giving passive ability regen everywhere, and then you just keep on looping that over and over and over. Now, one of the things you should do to make Flechette Storm feel much better is the moment you've shot off the flechette you want to be your last, immediately swap weapons. There are other actions you can do, but weapon swapping is by far the most consistent for me. Reason being is that it'll immediately bring you out of your animation and let you start shooting. The difference between doing this and not is pretty significant actually. This one's also specific to your mod setup and why I lean a bit more towards making more orbs, but warding if you have no woven mail will give 5 seconds of woven mail. But if at any point you break a tangle and max the woven mail timer up to 10 seconds from into the fray, any orbs you pick up whilst that buff is active will reset the timer back up to 10, no matter how long is left on the buff, which is so nice for keeping woven mail whilst you wait for your tangle to come off cooldown. For more general gameplay tips, always remember to spend your melee charges before supering, as Blade Fury will refund melee charges on ending. And before you go after a big target, always just quickly shoot Buried Bloodline to get weaken off of them. It's a really nice way to make your combos feel a little more bursty, and it helps with taking down healthier targets like champs. With this build as well, if you're ever dealing with a gun that has got a long reload time, just use Thread of Ascent. It's a much more natural feeling way of keeping your guns reloaded, and makes the flow of this build feel so much nicer too. That segues pretty nicely. Guns. Let's talk about them. There is so much perk variety and archetype variety you can run in this build, but that flexibility is needed. Outside of Blade Fury's suspending attack, you have no way to stun champs. Does this make the build bad? Absolutely not. Just bear in mind when you run high-end content, your weapons need to be featured artifact weapons, or you'll need anti-champ perk guns on them, because your build isn't going to stun. Besides that, use whatever's your cup of tea. Buried Bloodline for me never comes off, but in those other 2 spots, I've used anything and everything. Burst options like fusions and shotguns are super nice, but equally something built for ad clear can work. Same thinking goes for your heavy, burst, or an ad clear weapon like a machine gun is great. Where I think you can be a bit more picky is in your perks. Namely, I would keep an eye out for Proximity Power, Blast Distributor, Chill Clip, Trench Barrel, and 1-2 Punch. In some way or another, these all add damage somewhere in the kit, and they're all easy to trigger in the build. Chill Clip is the only one that you might look at and wonder why it's there, but its overload stun and frozen enemies also take bonus melee damage, which is nice to pair with Grapple. Apart from that, if a perk mentions Grenade or Melee, odds are it's good. Now, a new segment I get to add to these videos, Stats and Armor. Although hopefully it'll already be obvious what I'm going to say here, Melee and Grenade are what you want to invest in as much as possible. Annoyingly, there's not a stat archetype that makes that easy to do, which is again why I recommend Proximity Power or Blast Distributor as weapon perks. If you are using those, Blast Distributor gives up to 65 stat, so Grenade can be 135, and Proximity gives up to 54 melee stat, so melee can be 144. That aside, aim to get both to 100 stat over anything, then raise them up as high as you can. I prefer investing in melee as it gives bonus damage to both Flechette and Grapple, but I think whatever you can achieve easier is what you should go for. Here's another big one, armor archetypes. There's 2 you should absolutely have your eye on, and one slightly more niche one, at least at the time of recording. First is the Desert Perpetual set, with the interesting part being its 4-piece perk, with the part that we care about being that we can extend the duration of strand debuffs to enemies by 50%. That's our Super Suspend, but mainly Unravel from Flechette Storm and Grapple. Otherwise, the Bushido set is really nice, in both its 2-piece bonus and its 4-piece bonus. The heal on freshly drawn weapons when paired up with Woven can be life-saving at times, and the DR you get on bow, shotgun or sword kills is great, in that shotguns are an archetype that goes so well with this build. Otherwise, you can go for the Solstice set, but it requires you to really commit to Solar, which you only really have in your heavy slot, so I'm less inclined to fully recommend this. That said, don't let me put you off from trying any other armor sets you want to with this build. None of these are real deal breakers in the kit, they're more just nice additions to give a little bit more spice. And second to last part, Armour Mods. Helmets are special or heavy finder, 1 hands-on, and 1 harmonic siphon. Arms is a really tough one because all the premier perks you'd want are here. Both Grenade and Melee fonts are on the arms, but heavy-handed is here as well. I personally like triple heavy-handed as it lets me break that golden rule I mentioned before a little bit, because I can use my tangle to grapple melee for no cost, make an orb, and get woven mail through warding on a 1-second cooldown. But I don't want to say that's the best option, because I've been spouting off about how important stats are in the build, and that's literally the sole purpose of font mods. So this one's up to you, some combination of fonts or heavy-handed would be ideal. Chest is resist mods and 1 charged up, legs is a recuperation, better already, and a stacks on the stacks, but there could be room here to add in a weapon font, Class has Powerful Attraction, 1 Reaper, and Special Ammo Finisher. Be sure to use Special Finisher as much as possible. If you use it consistently enough, Double Special can work here. And last but not least, Artifact Perks. If it's not Edge of Fate launch, you can skip ahead. Otherwise, you want Tightly Woven, Elemental Benevolence, Reciprocal Draw, Refreshed Threads, Threaded Blast, Elemental Daze, Shield Crush, and Tangle Web. The important ones here are Tightly Woven, as that gives an extra 20 stat in Grenade and Class, which is like having 2 free font mods for just playing the game, and Shield Crush for bonus melee recharge and 50% increased melee damage, which is tied to Woven Mail, which you have almost all of the time for, again, just playing the game. This will drop down to a 12% increase in grapple damage though, but it's still definitely worth it. And that's a wrap. If you've stuck around till this point, thank you very much, and you'll be much better prepped than most to start zipping through the air with grapples and flechette storms, but do stick with it. That skill ceiling's high, but once you start nailing this build and its gameplay loops, you'll find this setup will just become glue to you. It's definitely the most fun I've ever had on Titan, and in contention for being one of my favourite builds in the game. And lastly, apologies for the delay, my work got crazy busy at just the time I didn't want it to, but I'm coming to the tail end of that project, so more time to focus on the channel stuff. Anyway, have fun, enjoy, but that's about it from me. See ya!